Hi everybody, this is my second attempt at this video. The first one was too long, so hopefully I shorten this and don't go into as much so I can still post it on YouTube. We're on part 1 for radicals, and I'm going to do part 2 on Wednesday. We have 7 teaching problems I'm going to give you here in the next couple of minutes. Easy one, square root of 16 is 4. As part of that, the cube root of 27 is 3. So we need to make sure we know things like this, which I know we know from middle school, but just going to remind you because sometimes it's easy to forget in the middle of a problem. Second teaching problem, you should know from Algebra 1 and geometry when you are simplifying radicals, when you have the square root of 20, that is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. The square root of 4 is 2. And when we simplify that, we get 2 times the square root of 5. So we can leave that there. Number 3. Square root of 32 x to the 8th. So how do we simplify that? The square root of 32, going back to what we had up here, which of these goes into 32? 16 does. So 32 we've now extended out to be that. And because this is square root, for our x's, we want it to be squared. What's squared? How can we break x to the 8th down here? And it's x to the 4th. So remember, when we do x to the 4th squared, that's x to the 8th. And we want to keep it as to the 2nd power because we're rooting. So then when we simplify this, this becomes 4. This stays as the square root of 2. And the square root of this is x to the 4th. So then when we rewrite everything, we get that. And that's our answer to number 3. Okay? So there's number 3. Let's go to number 4. Square root of 12c squared d to the 3rd. So there is our next teaching problem. The square root of 12 is a square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Square root of 4 is the perfect square. So that's what 12 simplifies to. Now for our c, how can we deal with c so that it's squared and it's c to the 3rd? C to the 3rd squared. C to the 3rd times c to the 3rd is c to the 6th. I made a little mistake here. Sorry about that. My fault. Hopefully you can go back in and change that. It was 12 c to the 6th d to the 3rd. So my fault on that. So that would mean c to the 3rd squared here. And then here's the tricky one. D. How do we deal with d to the 3rd power and deal with it with a squared there? Well, d squared is d squared, but we also have another d there. And it's kind of like what we did here. We found the perfect square, but we still have this. So d to the squared times d is d to the 3rd. So we've simplified that. We simplify c to the 3rd squared is c to the 3rd. The square root of d squared is d, and then times the square root of d. So that transfers there. So what do we have left? What do we have outside the radicals? 2 c to the third d. And then in the radical, we have 3d. You might need to go back in and look at this one again. This one can be a little tricky with this part right here. Okay? So if you need to go ahead back and do that one. All right. Number 5. So we get 3x over a square root of 6. We remembered from Algebra 1 and geometry we do not want radicals or roots in the denominator. So how do we get rid of that? Square root of 6 over square root of 6. That's 1. We don't change anything. So we get 3x times the square root of 6. Square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 6. And so that's our answer. You could probably leave that for an answer, but you know that this can simplify to be 1/2. So if you want to leave it as 1/2 or just get rid of the 1 here, that's fine too. And that becomes our answer. There's that one. 6. 5 over square root of x. No radicals in the denominator. So we square root of x over square root of x. There's that. There's our answer, pretty straightforward. And the last teaching problem, which is kind of long, so hopefully you can follow along with this. The problem might look like this to start. Okay, and there's actually, it looks kind of, it's not that bad. Well, let's play it out, because there's a lot of work to this. So we can simplify this to be that. Now, what did we do? If I gave you just this, we've done this already. It's the square root. So to what power do we square it to get to the 6th? Then we'll get a 3. And then what about here? We want to square it, and it's y to the 3rd squared. That's y to the 6th. Oh, so that means we got to add this little square root of y times that, because that'll give us 6 of the y's, but we need 7. So we have this. Let's bring this all the way down here, so that when we have this, sorry, I probably should have put a root sign over that. So when we simplify this, we get x to the 3rd all over y to the 3rd, because the square root of this squared is that, square root of this is that. Oh, and we still got this little bugger right there. Okay, so now we got to get rid of the square root of y. X to the 3rd times the square root of y. That's going to be in the numerator. What's the square root of y times the square root of y? It's y. So we have this. Whoops. Y to the 3rd times y. And there's our answer to that one. Okay. Lot of layers to that. Okay. So that's giving you that piece there on those. So you got a bunch of problems to kind of work on them, see how you do on it. And I've got a video that answers those problems that you can watch to check your work.